The sky over what used to be Sol was the color of rust and ash. It wasn't a natural color. It was the tired, stained canvas of a planet that had been used up. Jin stood on the observation deck of the old UN bunker, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. He was not an old man, but his face was lined with the maps of too many crises, too many last chances that had turned out to be false hopes. Below, the skeletal remains of the city were barely visible through the perpetual smog. Humanity's cradle was dying, and they were all still trapped inside it. Reports scrolled on a screen beside him. Crop failure in the Midwest arcologies. Ocean acidification reaching a terminal tipping point. The last of the fusion fuel reserves at 15%. The numbers were a quiet, constant scream. His personal tablet, face down on the console, held a different kind of report. His daughter, Su Min, was sick again. The respiratory filters in their sector were failing. Again, the medicine was in short supply. Again, they're here. Ambassador, a voice said softly behind him. It was his aide, Hana. Her eyes were wide, a mixture of fear and a hope so fragile it looked painful. Jin simply nodded. He had known the moment was coming. For months, anomalous signals had been picked up by the dying orbital network. Ships approaching with a technology that bent space in ways human science could only theorize about. They had announced themselves not with a declaration, but with a clean, mathematical signal, a primer for translation. They called themselves the Galactic Compact. The meeting chamber was the largest secure room left in the bunker. The air recyclers hummed with a strained wheeze. Jin stood at the head of a scarred metal table, a handful of Earth's last, exhausted leaders beside him. Then, the air in the center of the room shimmered. There was no flash, no dramatic beam of light. One moment it was empty. The next a figure stood there. His name was Kalen. He was tall, slender, with skin that seemed to be made of polished, dark wood and eyes that held the gentle light of a nebula. He wore no elaborate clothing, just a simple gray robe. His presence was not intimidating. It was profoundly calming. He radiated an aura of immense age and patience. Ambassador Jin. Kellen's voice was a soft melody in their minds, translated seamlessly. We have heard your world's distress signal, not the radio waves, but the older one, the cry of a biosphere in pain. We have come to offer our hand. What followed was not a negotiation. It was a presentation. With gentle waves of his long-fingered hand, Kalen projected images into the air. Lush, green worlds with 3 suns. Cities that floated like clouds, harmoniously integrated with forests and rivers. Ships that glided between stars not through brute force, but by folding the distance. He showed them medicine that could rebuild lungs scarred by pollution. Technology that could draw heavy metals from the soil and water. And stabilizers that could calm a raging atmosphere. The Compact is an alliance of thousands of species, Kalen explained. We have shared our knowledge and our burdens for over 10,000 of your years. We have laws, yes. Prime laws that protect life, that forbid the hoarding of galaxy-altering knowledge, that ensure no species is left to die in the dark. We see in you a spark, a fierce, creative, resilient spark. You have torn your world apart reaching for the stars. Let us show you how to reach them without breaking what you love. Jin felt his throat tighten. It was everything they had ever dreamed of. Salvation, not as subjects, but as partners. And the cost? Jin asked, his voice rougher than he intended. There is always a cost. Kalen inclined his head. Integration. You will learn our laws. You will contribute your unique perspective to the whole. You will receive a colony world, which we have already prepared. We call it Novus Cori. It has oceans, forests, continents that mirror your own lost beauties. It is yours. In return, you agree to abide by the Compact's prime laws. You're violent. Competitive history is noted, but it is not unique. The compact provides the framework to move beyond such things. One of the generals next to Jin shifted. You'd disarm us? We would ask you to turn your formidable energy away from building weapons and toward building a future, Kalen replied, his tone still gentle. The compact's peace is kept by shared prosperity and mutual protection, not by fear. Your military, as you term it, would be integrated into a larger galactic defense force. Your cleverness would be a great asset. The debate among the human leaders was short and desperate and tearful. There were fears, of course. Fears of subjugation, of losing their identity. But they were sitting in a bunker beneath a dying sky, watching the last generation of children cough themselves to sleep. The vote was unanimous. The signing ceremony took place a week later in the same room. A simple, crystalline data slate held the compact charter. Jin held the stylus, a sleek thing of alien metal. He thought of Su Min in the infirmary, her small hand in his. He thought of her drawing pictures of blue skies she had only seen in history files. He thought of giving her a world where she could run outside without a mask. His hand trembled as he pressed the stylus to the slate. A soft light glowed from the point of contact. It was done. A cheer, ragged and full of sobs, went up around the room. People hugged. For the first time in Jin's adult life, he saw tears of pure, untainted joy. The changes began immediately. Compact vessels, graceful and silent, descended into the polluted atmosphere. They set up atmospheric processors that looked like vast, crystalline flowers. Within days, the rust-colored haze began to thin. A pale, actual blue sky peeked through for the first time in decades. Medical drones visited every settlement. Jin was there when one hovered over Su Min's bed. A soft light scanned her, and then administered a mist. Within an hour, her labored breathing eased. Within a day, the color returned to her cheeks. The first ships to Novus Cori were wonders. Humans boarded them with a mixture of awe and terror. The journey, which should have taken lifetimes, felt like a smooth overnight train ride. And then they saw it. A pearl of blue and green and white, hanging in the velvet black. Novus Cori. As they descended, they saw verdant valleys, sparkling rivers, and cities already built, not alien spires, but architecture that felt strangely familiar, welcoming, designed with a subtle understanding of human needs. Jin walked on the grass of the new world, feeling the real sun on his face, breathing air that tasted clean and sweet. He watched Su Min, now healthy and strong, chase a floating bioluminescent insect, her laughter ringing like a bell. He felt a weight he had carried since birth finally lift. The compact was real. Their kindness was real. They had been saved. That night, in his new home with a window that looked out on a forest under two moons, Jin allowed himself to believe in a future. He looked at the stars, now part of a vast, friendly community. The old human suspicions, the paranoia born from a history of betrayal among themselves, felt small and shameful here. Kalen had spoken of their violent history as a childhood ailment, now to be outgrown. Jin vowed they would outgrow it. They would be good members of the compact. They would prove themselves worthy of this second chance. He did not know, as he fell into the first peaceful sleep of his life, that the compact's elders had already filed their preliminary report. In it, next to the species designation human, was a note. Highly adaptive. Rapid learners. Noted capacity for strategic deception and unexpected tactical innovation. Recommend. Integration successful. Monitor creative problem-solving closely. Ensure all major technological and archaeological developments are reported to the Science Council per prime law. Their gratitude currently ensures compliance. Potential for high utility. It was not a judgment, just a calm, clinical assessment. The treachery, when it came, would not be born of malice, but of this calm, superior certainty. But that was for the future. Tonight, it was only peace and hope and the deep, quiet sound of a world that was not dying. The air on Nova's quarry still smelled of rain and damp soil, a smell Mi-kyung never tired of. It was the smell of life, not recycled and processed, but wild and growing. She knelt by the stream, her boots sinking into the soft bank, and took another sample. The water was so clear she could see the colorful, pebble-like creatures scurrying along the bottom. Her datapad chirped, showing a complex readout of microbial life. It was all normal. Wonderfully, boringly normal. Finding anything that doesn't belong in a paradise checklist? A voice called out. She looked up to see Day picking his way down the slope, his field pack slung over one shoulder. He was the team's geologist, and where Mi-kyung saw life, Day saw the bones of the world. He had an easy smile that had made him popular in the new colony, and he and Mi-kyung had become close friends during their 2-year survey mission. Not a thing. Mi-kyung said, smiling back. The compact wasn't exaggerating. This place is perfectly tuned. Sometimes it feels almost too perfect. Day crouched next to her, dipping his fingers in the water. That's because we're used to a fixer-upper. Earth was all jagged edges and problems. This place is finished. It's a gift. The word gift hung in the air. It was the word everyone used. Their new lives were a gift. The technology was a gift. Their inclusion was a gift. Mi-kyung was grateful, truly. But a small part of her, the scientist part, always wondered about the price of a finished product. You never learned how it worked. Speaking of things that aren't on the checklist, Day said, his tone shifting to something more focused. I was doing a deep mineral scan in the northern ridge, the one beyond the designated survey boundary. Mi-kyung raised an eyebrow. Day, we're supposed to stick to the planned grids. The compact science protocols are very clear. I know, he said, waving a hand. But the scans showed a massive, solid structure, not a natural geological formation. The density is all wrong. It's buried deep, but it's there. A thrill, sharp and cold, shot through Mi-kyung. Something not made by the compact. Something older. A compact installation they didn't tell us about? Day shook his head. The energy signature is inert, ancient. And the composition? It doesn't match any known compact material database. I pulled the public archives. This is something else. They reported it that evening. Protocol was clear. Any anomalous find, especially a non-natural one, was to be communicated to the local compact liaison immediately. The human colony governor, a thoughtful man named Ji-hoon, made the call himself to Kalin, who was now the compact's chief science overseer for the sector. Callan's hologram appeared in the governor's office, his serene face showing polite interest. A fascinating discovery, Governor Ji-hoon. The compact appreciates your adherence to the protocols. A science council team will be dispatched to investigate. In the meantime, please cordon off the area. Your team is to continue its wonderful work on the southern biozones. The dismissal was gentle, but it was a dismissal. Mi-kyung and Day were to be removed from their own find. They looked at each other, a flicker of the old human stubbornness passing between them. With respect, Emissary Kalin, Mi-kyung found herself saying, my team discovered this. We have the context of the local geology and ecology. We could be of great assistance. Kellen's smile was kind, but firm. The prime laws governing precursor artifacts are complex and absolute, specialist Mi-kyung. Their study is reserved for the eldest races of the compact, who have the appropriate historical and ethical framework. Your enthusiasm is noted and valued. Your compliance is required." The words were a door sliding shut. Ji-hoon, seeing the tension, thanked Kalen and ended the call. He turned to them, his expression pained. "You heard him. We follow the rules. That is the agreement that saved us." For a week, they watched from a distance as compact ships, sleek and silent, descended on the northern ridge. They watched as a permanent facility was grown from seed pods in a matter of days. They were given no updates. Their access codes to the regional survey data were revoked. They couldn't let it go. "It's on our world," he muttered to Mi Kyung as they sat in the colony's common area. "We found it. Don't we have a right to know what it is?" "Our world is a gift, Dae," Mi Kyung repeated, the words tasting bitter. "And gifts can have strings." One night, Dae came to her cabin. His face was pale, his eyes wide. "I couldn't sleep. I was running old passive scans from before they put up the dampener field. I found a fragment, a tiny data bleed from their initial deep scan." He handed her a tablet. On it was a rendered image. Buried deep in the planet's crust was not just a structure, but a machine of impossible geometry. And wrapped around it, in a language that made her brain ache to look at, were symbols. Next to the image, Dae's software had thrown a probability match. It wasn't a perfect translation, but the suggested meaning was clear enough. Genesis Cradle. "What does that mean?" Mi Kyung whispered. "I don't know," Dae said. "But it's not just an artifact. It's a tool. A powerful one. And they've taken it." The next morning, official orders arrived. Not a request, but orders. Signed by Kalen and the Compact Science Council. The document was cold and legal. Due to the potentially unstable and hazardous nature of the precursor site, the northern hemisphere of Nova's quarry was declared a restricted zone. A human colony, situated in the south, was to reorient all agricultural and industrial output to support the long-term research facility. Human travel required new permits. The resources of their world were now, in part, allocated to a project they were forbidden to understand. Governor Ji-hoon read the order aloud in the town square. The hopeful, grateful faces of the colonists slowly changed. Confusion first, then disbelief, then a dawning, cold anger. Ji-hoon tried to reason. He sent a formal protest. The reply from Kalen was prompt. It was not angry. It was not threatening. It was a lesson. "Governor Ji-hoon," Kalen's voice played over the speakers, calm as ever. "The prime law is clear. Discoveries of this magnitude are a legacy for all civilized beings, not for a single species. To allow a young species to control such power is not freedom. It is an invitation to self-destruction or galactic instability. You have benefited from the shared knowledge of the Compact. This is now your chance to contribute to that shared legacy. Your sacrifice of local autonomy is noted and appreciated for the greater stability it provides. The law is clear. It is for the stability of all. The betrayal was not violent. No weapons were fired. No ships blockaded their orbit. It was a bureaucratic takeover, backed by a law they had gratefully agreed to. The Compact did not take their world by force. They simply reminded the humans who owned the D.Me-Kyung stood at the edge of the settlement, looking north towards the invisible barrier. They stood beside her, his fists clenched. "They used our gratitude as a leash," they said, his voice tight. Mi Kyung nodded slowly. The perfect gift had finally shown its price. They weren't partners. They were tenants. And the landlord had just declared eminent domain on the most important room in the house. She thought of Jin, the old ambassador who had signed them into this. She wondered if he felt the same cold hollowing in his stomach that she did now. One treachery, she thought, remembering the old, bloody human histories she'd studied. One was always enough to teach the lesson. The question was, what would the lesson be this time? Compliance? Or something else? She looked at the peaceful, perfect sky of Novus Cori, and for the first time, it felt like a very beautiful cage. The silence from the human colony was the most unsettling thing. Kalen, monitoring from the research facility in the north, had expected anger. He had prepared for protest, for emotional appeals, for the kind of passionate, illogical outbursts younger species were prone to. Instead, there was only quiet compliance. Governor Ji-hoon issued a formal statement. It was brief and perfectly courteous. It acknowledged the compact's authority and the wisdom of the prime laws. It promised the colony's full cooperation in reorienting their economy to support the research. The human settlers went about their business. They farmed the lands they were permitted to farm. They sent the requested materials north on automated shuttles. They asked no more questions. In his office, Ji-hoon looked older. The hope that had buoyed him was gone, replaced by a grim, tight focus. He met with a small group, not in the administration building, but in a maintenance hangar beneath the hydroponics bay. Mi Kyung and Dae were there. So was Tai-ho, the chief of colony engineering, a man who spoke with his hands, always stained with grease or energy residue. And Ji-woo, the head of their biosciences division, who had a calm, analytical gaze that missed nothing. They have given us their final answer, Ji-hoon said, his voice low. The law is a wall. We cannot appeal to their morality. They believe they are moral, so we do nothing? Dae said, the anger still raw in his voice. We do, Ji-hoon said, but not what they are watching for. We will give them exactly what they expect, obedient, grateful, and slightly broken people. And in the shadows, we will do something very human. We will learn, not from their teachers, but from their tools. He looked at Tai-ho, the technology they gave us, the star drives, the replicators, the environmental processors. We treat them like magic boxes. We use them, but we do not truly understand them. Can we change that? Tu-ho's eyes lit up with a fierce light. We were not meant to. The systems are sealed, self-repairing. But sealed is just another word for closed, and I hate closed systems. Give me a team. The quiet ones. The ones who ask why, more than how. Ji-hoon nodded. He then looked at Ji-woo, and the biological packages, the crop boosters, the medical nanots. Can we understand the blueprint, not just use the product? Ji-woo smiled, a thin, sharp smile. Every gift they gave us to fix our biology is a lesson in their own. Yes, we can unpack it. The project had no name. It was not discussed on any network. It operated on paper, in whispered conversations, in lines of code hidden within harmless simulations. In a locked sub-basement, Tai-ho and his team did the unthinkable. They took a perfectly functioning compact star drive module, a device meant to be replaced, not opened, and with painstaking care, they began to take it apart. It was not engineering. It was archaeology. They mapped every connection, every flow of energy that hummed with principles they didn't yet have words for. They didn't try to copy it exactly. Instead, they worked to understand the why. Why this shape? Why this energy frequency? They built crude human-made simulations, trying to replicate the effect with their own clumsier materials. They failed over and over. But each failure taught them a little more about the compact's physics. Meanwhile, in her lab, Ji-woo worked on a different kind of betrayal. The compact's medical nanots were miracles. They could rebuild tissue, fight any pathogen, reverse aging damage. They were also tiny black boxes. Ji-woo cultured them. She stressed them. She observed how they worked not on human tissue, but on simple, fast-growing Novus Cori moss. She learned to trigger their repair functions without the compact's control signal. It was a small step, but it was a step towards ownership. The most important work, however, was not in the labs. It was in the homes. It was in the schools. Su-Min, Jin's daughter, was a teacher now. Her father was gone, his heart having given out a few years after the move to Novus Cori. He died still believing in the dream, and Su-Min was glad he never saw the fracture. Now, she stood before a class of children who had never known Earth's smog. They only knew the gift. She changed the lesson plan. She showed them the old history files, the wars, the stupidity. But then she showed them the signing of the compact. And then she showed them the notice from Kalen, declaring their world a restricted zone. Why did they do that, Teacher Su-Min? A little boy named Min asked. He had her father's curious eyes. Because they could, Min, Su-Min said, her voice gentle but firm. And because they believe their reasons are better than ours. They gave us a gift, but they kept the manual. And when we found something of our own, they took that too, citing a rule we agreed to, without understanding its cost. That's not fair, a little girl said. No, Su-Min agreed. It is not. So we must learn a new lesson. The oldest lesson we have, but we forgot it for a while. What is the one thing no one can ever take from you? The children thought. Your thoughts? One ventured. Su-Min nodded. Yes, what you know. What you can do for yourself. We will learn to use their gifts, children. But we will not love the giver. We will understand the gift so completely that we no longer need the giver. We will be grateful for the knowledge, but never again for the hand that offered it. This became the quiet curriculum. Not rebellion, but independence. Not hatred, but cold, calculated understanding. The colony's culture shifted. The festive celebrations of Compact Day became subdued and stopped altogether. The art changed from images of grateful humans looking at alien benefactors to intricate diagrams of machinery, of stellar maps, of DNA helixes. Years passed. The Compact Research Facility in the north became a permanent fact of life, a silent citadel. Human shuttles delivered supplies to its perimeter and left without a word. Kalen's reports back to the Compact Council were positive. The humans were model citizens. A little quiet, perhaps creatively stagnant, but perfectly compliant. The artifact was proving complex, but progress was being made. The human situation was considered managed. In the sub-basement, Teho finally smiled. On his workbench lay a human-built reactor core. It was ugly, twice the size of the compact equivalent, and hummed with a less refined pitch. But it worked. It used the same fundamental principle he'd reverse-engineered from the gift. It was theirs. Ji Wu held a vial. Inside was a cloud of silvery particles. Not compact nanites, but human-made mimics. Simpler, less elegant, but programmable by her team. A tool of their own design. They brought their results to Ji-Hoon. The governor looked at the ugly reactor and the vial of mimic nanites. There was no triumph in his face, only a deep, weary satisfaction. They believe they have taken our future, Ji-Hoon said softly. They have only taken our trust. And one treachery was enough to teach us the value of what we still have. Our minds, our will. Keep going. Make it better. Make it ours. And tell no one. The human colony on Novus Cori was a placid lake. On the surface, nothing moved. But deep below, in the darkness, currents were beginning to flow, cold and purposeful, building towards an unseen tide. They were learning the most important lesson, how to take the gift and break the hand that thought it could forever be the giver. A century is a long time for humans. It is 4 generations. It is enough time for a wound to scar over, for anger to cool into a hard, polished stone of purpose. On the surface of Novus Cori, life continued, peaceful and productive. The human cities were clean and efficient. The people were healthy. They traded with other compact species, following every rule, fulfilling every quota. They were, in the eyes of the Galactic Compact, the perfect example of successful integration. Quiet, stable, and utterly unremarkable. Kalen, now so ancient his wooden skin had taken on the texture of stone, stood at the heart of the Northern Research Citadel. Before him, in a containment field of shimmering energy, hung the artifact. For 100 years, the Compact's greatest minds had worked on its secrets. And today, they had succeeded. The final sequence had been unlocked. The artifact did not explode with light. It simply unfolded. Not physically, but in their minds. A map of stunning complexity filled the chamber. A 3-dimensional weave of star systems, gravity wells, and pathways. At specific coordinates, planets glowed with a soft, golden light. Symbols, now clearly translated, labeled them Genesis cradles. A murmur of awe went through the assembled Compact scientists. A Genesis cradle. A theoretical concept. A legend. A world that could be triggered into a state of perfect, instantaneous terraformation. The power to create paradise anywhere. To expand their civilization without limit. It was the ultimate prize. Kalen felt a profound surge of satisfaction. The prime laws had been correct. Keeping this power from the humans, from any single species, had been the only ethical choice. This was for the benefit of all. Prepare the data for transmission to the Compact High Council, he said, his voice like wind through dry leaves. And mobilize the Grand Expeditionary Fleet. This changes everything. The news rippled through the Compact like a shockwave. A grand fleet, composed of the oldest and most powerful species vessels, began to gather at a rally point near Novus Cori. It was a breathtaking display of unity and power. Millions of ships, like a swarm of elegant, metallic fish, filled the space near the human world. They paid the colony no mind. It was a backdrop, a footnote to history. In the main administration building of the southern human colony, now led by Hana, the former aide who had become a governor of Iron Will. A quiet meeting took place. The faces around the table were older, harder. Teho's hands were still stained, but now with the residue of advanced polymers, not simple grease. Ji Wu's eyes were as analytical as ever. And by a screen, Min, Su Min's son, now a man in his prime with a network engineer's calm focus, waited. The fleet is fully assembled, Min said, his voice soft. Their communications are focused on the expedition. Their internal security monitoring is at routine levels. They are not looking at us. Hana nodded. She looked at a small old locket on her desk. It held a picture of Jin and of Su Min, who had passed the lesson on to her son before she died. Then it is time, Hana said. A century of silence. A century of learning. Let us send our reply. There was no grand speech. No declaration of war. What happened next was not an attack. It was an undash-making dot at a precise time, across every human settlement on Novus Cori and on the few other compact worlds where they had established small enclaves. Every human-made screen flickered. The same message appeared, first in the Compact's common script, then in every major species language. Title: Open Source, Framework for Compact Technology, Human Refinements. What followed was not a weapon. It was a library. A vast, staggering, meticulously organized data dump. It contained complete, foundational principles for compact star drive mechanics, but with human modifications that reduced energy waste by 18%. It held the blueprints for environmental processors, but with new filtration sequences that worked twice as fast. It detailed the molecular programming of medical nanites. With the lockout codes removed and human-designed safety protocols added, it was every gift the compact had ever given them. Taken apart, understood, improved, and given away. The data was broadcast on every frequency. It was beamed directly to every species' homeworlds and colony ships. It was wrapped in simple, open access code. It could not be blocked. It could not be unseen. On the bridge of the flagship of the Grand Fleet, Kalen stared at the scrolling data on his screen. For the first time in centuries, he felt something cold and sharp in his chest. It was not fear of the technology. It was understanding. He saw the elegant, brutal logic of it instantly. They were not fighting the compact. They were making the compact irrelevant before the shock could even settle. The second phase began. From the surface of Novus Cori, and from hidden shipyards in the asteroid belts of lonely stars, human vessels rose. They were not like compact ships. They were angular, practical, built for endurance, not beauty. They did not head for the Grand Fleet. They moved to pre-planned coordinates, forming neat, precise formations. There were thousands of them, more than anyone knew they had. A short, clean audio message followed the data burst. Hana's voice, calm and clear, echoed across the galaxy. People of the compact, we were given gifts. We were given laws. We were given a future that belonged to someone else. We have improved the gifts. We reject the laws that made us second class. We are taking our future. As of this moment, humanity secedes from the Galactic Compact. Do not follow us. And then, in a display of coordination that made every compact tactician feel a chill, the entire human fleet and every human ship on every world engaged the reverse-engineered, improved star drives. Space folded around them not with the gentle shimmer of compact drives, but with a sharp, decisive crack of energy. In a single synchronized moment, every human being in compact space vanished. They left behind empty cities on Novus Cori, fully powered, fully functional, and utterly vacant. They left behind their old, unmodified compact technology, neatly stacked in warehouses. They left behind a galactic economy that had just been handed the keys to its own technological base. The Grand Fleet hung in space, its glorious purpose suddenly hollow. The Genesis cradles were a distant, theoretical prize. But the human act was a present, galactic-scale earthquake. Every minor species, every disgruntled faction, every client race now had the knowledge to build their own star drives, their own medicine, without asking the elder races for permission or paying their tariffs. Kalen stood on his silent bridge, the map of the Genesis cradles still glowing uselessly before him. He looked at the spot where the human colony had been, now just a pattern of empty lights on the planet below. They had not fired a single shot. They had not broken a single physical law. They had simply taken back the only thing that was ever truly theirs, their ingenuity, and they had used it to give away the foundation of the compact's power. The treachery, he realized with a crushing weight, had not been theirs. It had been his. And one treachery, it turned out, was enough for humans to learn everything they needed to take everything away. The silence in the wake of the human departure was deafening. It was not a quiet of peace, but of profound shock. The Grand Expeditionary Fleet, a symbol of unity and power just hours before, now drifted like a beautiful, useless ornament. The mission to the Genesis cradles was not canceled, but it felt hollow. What was a new paradise when your old order was crumbling? On the bridge of the flagship, Kalen felt the weight of his long, long years. The reports flooding in were not of military defeat, but of systemic collapse. On 100 worlds, client species were broadcasting the human blueprints. Engineering guilds, once tightly controlled by the elder races, were in open revolt. demanding the right to build the improved human designs. The compact's economic model, built on controlled technological advancement and dependency, was unraveling at the speed of light. They had not lost a war. They had lost their reason for being. The expedition to the first Genesis cradle proceeded. It took months. The fleet, its morale shattered, moved through the strange pathways on the map. When they arrived at the designated coordinates, they found a planet. It was barren, a rocky, airless ball of dust, scarred by ancient impacts. Scans revealed no hidden energy, no dormant potential. It was just dead. Further investigation revealed the terrible truth. The artifact was not a key. It was a test, or a tombstone. The energy required to activate the map had been its last spark. The Genesis cradles were either a myth, or they had been activated and used eons ago. The artifact had offered the compact a dream, and in reaching for it, they had taken their eyes off the waking world. And the humans had acted. Kalen returned to Novus Quarry. The research citadel in the north stood as a monument to his people's arrogance. The human cities in the south were pristine, waiting for owners who would never return. He walked through the quiet streets of the main colony. The parks were perfectly maintained by automated systems. Lights were on in homes. It was a museum of a people who had simply walked away. He knew what he had to do. It was a formality, perhaps, an indulgence, but he needed to understand. He needed to hear it. His aides established a link through the old human-cum networks, routed through a dozen anonymizers. It took days, but a response finally came. The humans had left a channel open. For this, a screen in the empty governor's office flickered to life. Hana's face appeared. She was older, her hair silver, her eyes the same calm, unyielding pools he remembered from her youth as Jin's aide. She sat in a simple room made of a material he did not recognize. There were no symbols of power behind her, just a wall and a small plant in a pot. Emissary Kalen, she said. No title, just a name. Governor Hana, he replied, the old title feeling like dust in his mouth. You left. We did. The artifact. It was empty. The cradles were dead. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Hana's lips. We know. Kalen paused. You know? We studied the artifact's energy signature for decades from afar, through passive scans. We guessed. A power that ancient offered so freely? It was far more likely to be a lure or a legacy than a library. You were so focused on the prize, you forgot to look at the box. The cold feeling in Kellen's chest grew colder. While his people had poured their genius into a dead end, the humans had been studying them. Why? The word escaped him, carrying the weight of centuries of certainty now turned to ash. Why such a destructive exit? You gave away secrets that maintained peace for millennia. Your peace, Hana corrected, her voice still quiet. Your stability? Built on control. You took our discovery. You took our sovereignty on Novus Quarry. You taught us with perfect clarity that in your compact, some species are more equal than others. That trust is a liability. One treachery was enough to make that lesson permanent. We gave you everything, Kalen said, and for the first time, a crack appeared in his serene tone. A hint of raw, bewildered pain. We saved you from extinction. You did, Hana nodded, and we were grateful. Then you showed us the price. The price was our future. So we paid you back. We took everything you had. You took nothing. You left it all. Kalen gestured at the empty city around him. No, Hana said, leaning forward slightly. We took the value of your gifts by giving them away. We took your authority by showing the galaxy it was built on a monopoly, not wisdom. We took our future by building it ourselves, away from you. You are left with the consequences of your own actions, with a galaxy that no longer needs you in the same way. You are left with the truth. Kalen was silent. The truth was a vast, empty hall where his convictions used to live. What will you do now? He finally asked. We will live, Hana said simply. We have our own networks now, our own worlds. We call it the Solstitial Accord. It has one primary law. No species shall ever hold the power of life or death over another through controlled knowledge. We will probably fight. We will definitely disagree. They will be our fights, our stupidities, our triumphs, not something managed by elder beings from on high. She looked at him, and in her gaze he saw no hatred, only a final cold clarity. You wanted us to be part of your story. We decided to write our own. The lesson you taught us was the only one we needed. Goodbye, Kalen. The screen went dark. Not to static, but to a perfect, absolute black. Kalen stood in the silent human city for a long time. He looked at the clean streets, the efficient buildings, the ghost of a society that had learned, adapted, and ultimately rejected them. The humans had not destroyed the compact with weapons. They had simply made its core principle paternalistic control obsolete. They had taken the gifts and broken the cycle of dependency. He walked back to his ship. The reports still chattered. A mining consortium in the Kirax belt had declared independence using human-designed reactors. The medical cartel on Zen Prime had fallen. The galaxy was not ending. It was becoming louder, messier, more chaotic, and more free. It was becoming, he realized with a terrible irony, more human. The compact would survive, but as a smaller thing. A cooperative of choice, not a necessity. The humans, the quiet, grateful, fragile humans, had not waged a war. They had taught a lesson, and they had taken everything that mattered, their own destiny, and in doing so, they had taken the compact's unspoken empire. One treachery, it turned out, was enough. Enough for humans to learn. And once they learned, they took everything.